right, I'm on with Gian-Marco in Switzerland. How's it going in Switzerland right now?
Hey Dave, it's good. It's evening, and yeah,
And
just waiting for your call here.
yeah, I got a guy with better hair than me. This is very upsetting, but
Ah,
we're gonna do it anyway. All right. So one of the things you wanted to talk about was sort of coming out as an atheist, which I think is really interesting, and it's one of the things we've talked about here, that people feel this need to make this proclamation. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey?
yeah, sure. Well, I was born and raised in Switzerland, so it's not a that religious country. It's just like, yeah. I had some religion classes in primary and stuff, but I was never really religious.
Yeah.
Um,
Catholic? Was it Catholic classes?
no, it was evangelical.
Okay.
And yeah, then I went to Sydney for a exchange semester when I was like 18, 19. And I stumbled upon this debate of Ken Ham against Bill Nye.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I was like, to say the least, I thought it was ridiculous that some people would think that way, like Ken Ham would.
So basically, for people that don't know, he's the guy that runs the biblical park somewhere in America, and he debated Bill Nye about evolution versus creationism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was like a bit confused, and yeah, I told my brother, and he was a little bit more into that, and he showed me Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins, and I thought it would be a good English lesson too, to read those books like God is Not Great, and so yeah, I thought I was talking to some people there because I had like connections to everywhere in the world, because like I had some people from Chile there, from Switzerland, from Belgium, from everywhere. So what astounded me the most was this guy from Switzerland actually, who was like, well, I believe in creationism. And I was like, it was a Swiss guy like me.
Right.
Who was thinking that like Noah's Ark really happened.
Right.
It was just mind blowing for me. So I started to watch debates on YouTube and stuff. And yeah, when I came home, I was like a full blown atheist.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it sounds to me that you deal with exactly what most atheists deal with, which is that it's not actually that big of a deal, but you feel like you have to sort of say it because otherwise the world just thinks you believe something that you don't.
Yeah, right. It's like that. And like when I discovered all of this, I was a little bit more militant. I don't know how to say it. Like,
Sure.
I thought people who believe this stuff would be like, or are stupid, or not really stupid, but like ignorant and kind of weird. So I got a little bit out of that. I let them have their beliefs and whatever. Yeah, but I feel the need to tell that I don't believe that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
it's funny because I always say, it's like, to me, I don't care what you believe. As long as you're not trying to chop my head off or making me believe anything else, then you go ahead and believe whatever you want, you know?
Yeah.
All right, so one of the things that you wrote in that you wanted to talk about that I thought was really interesting was that you wanted to talk about the difference between the U.S. Constitution and the Swiss Constitution, and that basically you think that we're, don't worry about the hair, that we are sort of obsessed with never changing our Constitution, but you guys actually change your Constitution pretty frequently, right?
Yeah, it was like I heard this whole debate about gun regulation and the Second Amendment of the United States, and I thought to myself, like, why wouldn't they allow to change that? Like, leave beside all this lobbying and stuff from the NRA, but I've read a Gallup poll that like 55% of the American people are for more strict gun regulation. So, and I looked into it a little bit more, and what I found was pretty astonishing to me, I've always thought like the American Constitution is kind of static and just for 230 years it
Yeah.
was almost the same. And Swiss Constitution, as you may know, we have referendums like 4 times a year where people just send in some ideas and we vote on it.
Right.
And this is like changing the constitution every time.
Wait, did you say you guys do that 4 times a year?
Yeah.
Man, that's a lot. And people show up and vote 4 times a year and actually change the Constitution that often?
Yeah, it is like, well, we have like 55% of the people vote. The rest is just like, yeah, well, do whatever you want.
Sure. Yeah.
And but we vote like for 12 to 15 different referendums each year.
Huh.
Like in 4 steps.
Yeah. So, all right. So, have you seen any? Give me like one good example of that, like something that you guys have changed for the better, and one time that maybe it didn't work, if you can think of something.
Yeah, sure. Well, we had 2010, I think. It was like the far right party of Switzerland, the SVP, proposed that we should ban minarets, like the towers on the mosques So, and it was accepted by the people. So now we have in our constitution, it was Article like 72, that it's prohibited to build minarets. Like, and we have like 2 built up to this point in all Switzerland, so it was like no issue at all.
Right. So it wasn't really a problem, but the far right grabbed it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like xenophobia and like populistic and and a good thing we accepted. I really need to think of that. It's like most things are good that they're not accepted.
Right.
Like we have some like all these proposals are either far right or far left. Like minimum wages, and I mean that's kind of okay, but minimum wages were like set to $22 per hour, and that's just ridiculously high. I mean, who would pay that?
Right. So does that ultimately hurt the Swiss economy? I mean, do businesses then leave Switzerland? Because it sounds like Switzerland, we always think of it as, oh, they have so much money, everybody's so happy, it's so great.
Yeah, no, I think so, yeah. Well, I'm not an economist or thing, but from what I've heard and what I've read, I think it would really hurt the country as a financial hotspot. And also,
So the other thing that you wanted to talk about, which is one of the things that almost everyone in Europe especially has wanted to talk to me about, is the refugee situation and political correctness. So I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, so refugee crisis in Switzerland itself, I mean, I'm not that fond of like the whole European situation. I know where borders are closed on the Balkan route and stuff.
Don't worry, I'm not going to quiz you on everything. We're just getting your opinion.
Okay. So yeah, I'm basically for like letting refugees in. Like, I mean, we're all humans. We should get along with each other and help each other. That's like humanitarian aspect of it. But like the left is pushing like these ideas or these reasons to let them in. Like, for example, when someone says just like something a little bit, I don't know, let's say controversial about refugees and what they're doing, it's just like shouted down and you cannot talk properly about what the issue is with the refugees that come in. I mean, I'm all for letting them in, but we have to talk about the issues that are coming to us with this.
Yeah.
And they're just like saying that or saying that no, there are no problems at all coming with this, or like maybe a little bit financial, but nothing really cultural or religious.
Well, listen, that's exactly why I'm talking about it on the show, because we got to have these conversations. Listen, that was quick, but it was a pleasure talking to you, and thanks.
Same.
All right, I'm on with Adam in Sweden. Adam, how's it going?
It's going just fine, actually.
Great.
So, looking forward to this.
Cool. Well, me too. So, I've mentioned a lot about Sweden, and just recently I had Tino Sanandaji on the show, who is an economist from Sweden and one of the few people that will talk about the political correct situation and sort of this regressive ideology that seems to have taken hold in Sweden. And I got a lot of messages from Sweden talking about that. And you were the one we went with, so we expect you to represent your whole country. Here we go.
Oh boy, I'm the most un-Swedish Swede you just could find, so I'm not really a good representation there.
Well, as you know, I believe that it's about the individual, not about the bigger group. So let's start with that. So one of the things you wanted to talk about was that, the political correct, this seeping ideology and what it's doing to society in Sweden. So let's start with that.
I've been doing a lot of thinking to actually explain this, because it's fairly hard, really, since you need so much context for it, and we have so little time for this.
Well, do the best you can. Let's see how much thinking you've done.
I think I'll just say that it goes back at least 100 years. Started with the socialism and everything like that in Sweden. But in the modern era, at least since the 70s, Sweden was a hotbed for very radical leftism in the 70s. We even had leftist terrorists and everything like that in Sweden that occupied the West German, it's called West German Embassy. So it has a long tradition. But the biggest things I actually want to explain with this, that explains how Sweden works today, is two terms. And I think I've translated them reasonably. One is called the opinion corridor. I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but I'll give an explanation.
Yeah, please,
anyway.
please.
That is, in Sweden, there's a very narrow corridor of opinions you're allowed to have. The rest, well, if you have any opinion outside of that, like me, you're a Nazi, you're a racist, you're a bigot, and, you're all of that.
Now, just to be clear, you're not a Nazi or a racist or a bigot? Let's just get that out there.
Yeah, I'm neither of those.
Okay, good.
I may be very Aryan, but I'm not a Nazi. So, and that opinion corridor, for my entire lifetime, has just been narrowing. And I would definitely say that it narrowed its most when Obama became a president.
Really?
Yeah, I would say Sweden, the last, I'd say 2 decades, I guess, has tried to emulate America in all its worst parts. So we always had this opinion corridor, but then we saw how you guys started going with the political correctness part, and then it just went worse. So, I think that explains that part. Then we also have another term that we didn't invent, but a Swedish political commentator in the 70s put to coin very well. He's called Wilhelm Moberg. And I would recommend reading up about him, because he will give a lot of context to the bullshit that's going on today. And I think I'll try to pronounce this right. Democratorship, he called it. Mm-hmm. Combination of the word democracy and dictatorship.
Right.
And that works essentially in that we have a formal democracy, but on the behest of the cultural force that our government represents, we have an enforced dictatorship of a sort in the form of the cultural hegemony in Sweden that has its expression in the opinion corridor.
Right. So what you're talking about basically is, as we've used this phrase, the oppression Olympics, you guys are really big on this, that depending on who you are and where you're from and your religion and your skin color, we really put you in this pecking order, right?
Absolutely.
And you were very much a homogenous society, and now that's really changing, so the pecking order starts getting even...
Yeah, we were a very homogenous society up until at least the 90s. Mm-hmm. That's when the Balkan Wars erupted, and we had the genocide and everything like that, and we got a lot of refugees from that. They've integrated mostly well. We didn't really get the problems until we had the very large immigration from the Middle East. It's easier to integrate a European culture than a completely foreign culture from an entire different part of the world with different cultural context and all of that. But
But even saying that would label you a racist, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm definitely a racist for saying that here in Sweden. So the problem is, because that's outside the opinion corridor, we can't talk openly about it. And that's caused a lot of issues.
Yeah, so that leads directly to the other thing that you wanted to talk about.
Exactly, I mean.
Yeah, it leads to the other thing you wanted to talk about, which is the rise of the right in Sweden, which is a new phenomenon. So can you lay that out?
Yeah, it's a new phenomenon because in Sweden the left has essentially ruled since post-World War II. For 60 years we had one party dominant in our, what's it called, parliament. For 60 years we had the Social Democrats completely dominant in the parliament. Only one interruption for 4 years. And that's kind of, when I look about it, I'm a student of history, so I can see the negative side of it. It's absolutely insane to see just have one party do that. They did achieve some pretty good things, the things we call folkhemmet in Sweden, our welfare state. They did achieve that, but they also dismantled it. But the right has risen because we can't speak about these things. And they're the only ones that had the balls to speak about it because, well, the extreme part were already Nazis. The less extreme part didn't really care to be compared, that they were compared with the Nazis, so they just talked about it. And now the only way to talk about this is to dedicate yourself to being on the far right, essentially.
Yeah, so we see this happening in America right now, and that's why I've been talking about it, because I see all of you guys, not just in Sweden, but all over Europe, I see this happening, and I'm trying to help that not happen here. So what does that do for a person like you, a person that is not a Nazi and is not a racist, and yet you see a problem with society and only one group talking about it? Where does that leave you?
Completely alone, essentially. Because the left, well, they think I'm the great Satan. The right, well, I'm also the great Satan for them because, well, you know, I kind of think that brown people are people too and judge them like people, and that's not right according to the far right.
Yeah.
I mean, I consider myself ideologically independent because I consider ideologies to be secular religions. So I shy away from those things. So it's very hard being of my camp in Sweden, which is, you know, liberal essentially.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's the whole purpose of this show, and almost everyone that I'm talking with today all over the world. I mean, this is what it's all about. So just to end this real quick, though, because we got to go, you're starting your own YouTube channel, right, to get these ideas across? So where can we send people?
The YouTube channel has been slow in the uptake because I've been busy. I'm a college student, so. But look for the Thought Criminals channel in the near future.
All right, I'm on with Michael in Colorado. Michael, how are you?
Hi, Dave. I'm good. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. So I have to tell you, we picked 20 people out of 1,200. And I hope you take this the right way. You are the elder statesman of the group.
Oh, boy. Wow.
Yeah, not to add any extra pressure.
Okay, well, that'll give me a beer at the local bar, so that's good.
Absolutely. So first off, you had a really interesting history. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you. And you were in the Navy. So first off, tell me when you served and where you served.
I was in the Navy. I joined when I was 18, out of high school. Went in 1961. Put that in context, let's see. President Kennedy announced the Apollo program. West Side Story came out, and our President Barack Obama was born. When he was in diapers, I was in boot camp. So. And I served 8 years. Got out in 1969 to go to college. San Diego, I was on a guided missile destroyer all over the Pacific for a while. Came back, got involved in the Polaris submarine program. And I was stationed in Spain for a couple of years and in Charleston for a couple of years, working on some high-tech, secret stuff. And said adios to that and went to school on the GI Bill, took a degree in anthropology, and pretty much minored in history. And, then life went on.
When you look back at that part of your life, the service part of your life, do you think of it fondly? Do you miss it? Anything like that?
I do think of it fondly. Distance, does make the mind grow a little bit more, accommodating, I think.
Sure.
But all in all, it was really good for me. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was 18 years old. My friends, many of them were going off to college, but I knew I wasn't really ready for that somehow. It was good for me in a lot of ways. It helped me to grow up. It gave me some responsibility, let me know that I can handle that. Gave me the equivalent of a master's degree in electrical engineering, which was a big help. But when I got out, I abandoned engineering and went directly into anthropology because 8 years of engineering is enough.
But I'm pretty sure, if my notes serve me correct, that in 1964, before you went to anthropology, you built a computer?
Well, I built, and more to the point, I programmed my first digital computer. Because when I got in the Polaris program, all the systems on the boats, these are intercontinental ballistic missile systems, are run by computers. In 1964, those computers were probably not quite as powerful as the iPhone that we have today.
Right.
But I was very fascinated by the computer, still am. And as part of my training, we put together a little block system of computers, of a digital computer, and learned how to do the basic programming. It was all what we call machine language. It was all ones and zeros. And then we went to the lab and we started programming and working on the big guys in 1964. So that was my introduction to digital computers.
Yeah, so that's so cool. So 1964, you're working on the very beginnings of digital computers. And as you said, all zeros and ones. Do you remember ever having the glimpse of what that could become? Did you ever think you could be walking around with this thing in your pocket that would be exponentially more powerful than everything you were working on at the moment?
I don't think anybody did at the time, because it was the beginning of the solid state years. These things were really big. They were in cabinets that doors opened, etc. I remember when the personal computer, the Altair, and those came out. It was pretty neat. You could have one at home. But hell, digital or LCD watches were the big thing back then, and Texas Instrument calculators. Nobody really thought that we'd be able to have an iPhone and communicate face-to-face, Dick Tracy-like things when I was growing up, the comics. We thought that would be pretty cool, but nah, who ever thought that the advances would be that fast?
Yeah. But I remember being at a friend's house, probably when I was 6, on a Texas Instruments computer playing. They had their own version of Pac-Man. It was like their ripped-off version of Pac-Man. I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Well, there was a book called Future Shock you're probably familiar with years ago, in which Alvin Toffler predicted that progress would be so fast that by the time you began to get a little bit comfortable, the next thing would come along, and you'd be a little bit in shock, and you deal with that. The next thing would come. The next thing would come. But I think that's pretty much where we're at right now.
It does seem like that the second we get okay with a little bit of the technology, or just another app comes out, the second you're okay with one, and then now this one does something else and you forget that. It's fascinating.
It is. And, what I find kind of disheartening is a lot of people, one of the things I do here is I'm on the library board, and I help some of the older retirees here try to deal with their iPads and their iPhones, and God help them, their Windows computers, et cetera.
That must be a trial in patience.
It's tough.
Can I give my mom your number?
You can.
Okay, good.
Not a problem.
Great.
I do that all the time. But, I think a lot of the older people are now understanding that this is actually a device that can be used for things like we're doing here, and for making contact with other people and spreading ideas and getting your ideas out. So as they become easier to use in a human sense, people are going to look past the technology now. I have a neighbor she's 20 years older than me. All right, so she's 93 years old. She has an iPad.
Love that.
She does her email and her little Google things and all that with her iPad, and she's quite familiar with it. It's sort of magic to her, but she knows how to use it, so it puts her in touch. That's
pretty cool. All right, let's shift topics altogether, because you gave me a bunch in the submission. You are an atheist. Were you always an atheist? When did you decide you were an atheist? You were an atheist before it was cool. Now it's cool.
Yeah, well, there's some places that's still not cool. I can point you to right down the street here. We have 5 churches and 4 real estate offices in a town of 800. So think about that.
Wow. So you're a real minority. You're a minority in a minority right there.
Yeah, I am, especially here. I remember I was thinking about that, and I remember when I was probably 5 or 6, living with my grandmother, going to church Sunday mornings, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Methodist church, little North Texas town, sitting in Sunday school, looking out the window at the tree and the swing, and so I'm thinking, God, I'd rather be any place but here. Right? I think probably realistically about the time I figured out Santa wasn't real, I had the same kind of questions about the stories I'd been taught. So for about as long as I can remember, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the other things you mentioned is that you're sort of fascinated by how Christians and just religious people in general are often deceived by their sources. So it's not even necessarily the source itself, right? It's not necessarily the book itself, but it's sort of the messengers that are the deceivers. Am I getting what you said sort of correctly?
I think it's both those things. If you look at Abrahamic religions today, they don't have what we consider to be basic hardcore evidence for their claims. The only thing they have for a source are books that stem out of oral traditions, that stem out of ancient manuscripts that have been copied and recopied and copied and changed and different. So I think there's a problem because the people who are their pastors and who are their priests and go to divinity school, they understand the history of their religion. They know the questions involved. They know the contradictions. They know that a lot of this is really false. But they don't tell that to their congregations. So the people who hear this really have no independent way of judging whether this is real or not. So if I have a book, somebody's giving me a book and says, look, this is reality, I'd have some questions. Well, where did it come from? What does it say? How do we know what it says is true, et cetera? So digging back into those sources and being able to come up with what we think are historically realistic stories about all this helps people to be a little bit more critical and judge the things that they just take on faith.
Yeah. So one of the things when I've talked to other atheists and when I talk about atheism in general, one of the questions I get is people say, well, how do you have a moral center then? How are you able to have a code that you live by without religion? I think your laugh already sort of gave away your answer, but tell me, what have you based your moral center on?
What do I base my moral center on? Well, like I tell, we have 2 adopted kids. They're adults these days, and they're doing quite well. And one of the reasons that they're doing well is because they know what's right and what's not right. I think humans have this inherent ability to understand that the right way to act, for example, is the way you act when nobody is watching you. You come out of this feeling of compassion for other people. You come out of this feeling of being able to help other people and to be basically a good person. I mean, sociopaths aside, if you're a normally constructed human being, I feel that you understand this. I mean, the Greeks understood it, the Romans understood it, the Plains Indians understood it, right? They were all allied to different religious systems. So it's not something out of a religious tradition or a book that says follow these rules. I mean, it's wrong if you kill somebody, right? In murder, for example. That's just human basic wrong. And I don't think it takes an ancient book and dictates from the guy in the sky to say, no, do this and you're in trouble.
Yeah, and if it does, there's probably a bigger problem.
There's a bigger problem.
There's a bigger problem. All right, so unfortunately we have to wrap it up, but let people know. So you're working on a book, correct? And you have a website. So where can we send people?
You can send people. I have a book. I self-published it. It's out on Amazon, The Q Fragments, and it's about basically what we've been talking about.
Great.
It's digging back into the sources and to finding out, in a secular situation, what happened. It's a novel, characters and action. You can go to theqfragments.com. It's out there. Links are out there. I podcast it. Every chapter is a podcast that I read. So I just like people to read it, enjoy the tale, and think about the message that underlies this, right? That all of these myths and everything may have come from some particular historical actors and people, but they're not necessarily what people are trying to get us to believe today.
Yeah. Well, I love that message, and I love chatting with you, so thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
and thank you for your program.
All right, I'm on with Brendan in Ireland. Brendan, how's it going?
How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing well. I feel like you could be my Irish cousin. We are dressed exactly the same.
Yeah, all our cousins dress the same over here, apparently, yeah.
Apparently. Actually, my brother-in-law is half Irish, and his name is Brendan, so there you go.
Okay, cool. Where in Ireland does he hail from?
Oh, God, I probably should know that. I'm going to have to get back to you on
Sorry.
that one. Oh, no.
It's small enough.
You already got me in trouble. I think he's from near the local pub.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, the pub.
Everybody, yeah.
All right, so what's going on these days in Ireland? We don't hear much about Ireland in the news. How's it going over there?
Yeah, we're pretty small, so you won't hear much about us, but kind of at the moment, we've just had a new government formed, 10 weeks after our election, miraculously enough. There's a lot of discussion kind of, we had water charges were brought in, and that's kind of been discussed a lot. The far left, as in the socialist parties, they're not very happy with it. Neither are any parties really, apart from the parties in government. There's discussion over repealing our 8th Amendment, which is basically it stipulates that abortion is illegal in Ireland. But obviously on the good front, we last year we legalised marriage for homosexuals, which is fantastic. I wasn't in the country. I was actually abroad in China for the year, and you're not allowed to vote if you're Irish abroad, which I wasn't too happy that I couldn't vote. But I mean that was brilliant.
Yeah.
And
wait, so let's pause there for a second. So that's really interesting. So you guys voted for legalizing gay marriage, which is obviously very great and a very liberal, progressive concept. And then at the same time, you're telling me that they're voting on possibly repealing a law that allows abortion.
No, to repeal the law that disallows it.
Oh, so abortion is abortion completely illegal?
Yeah, it's illegal in the Republic.
Wow. So I assume people are having illegal abortions because people have them whether it's legal or not, right?
They're generally heading over to England.
Wow. So do you think the law is going to pass?
I would say so. I mean, there was say if you take last year, there was obviously fervent kind of opposition from perhaps the churches and stuff against gay marriage, but no one really cares that much about what the churches say anymore.
So are the churches, I mean, are they losing their power quickly? How much power do they actually hold over politics these days?
Very little. They're kind of auxiliary, I guess. I mean, like, you won't get too many people going to mass, and they don't take too much of it seriously, and most of Ireland is very, with regards to, say, homosexuality or whatever, we're generally, as a country, we're generally quite all right with it. We're a country basically like, as long as you don't annoy me, I don't really care what you do. You know what I mean? And
that's my personal ideology too.
Perfect.
Yeah, I need to come to Ireland, obviously. So you're studying politics, right?
Yeah, I am.
What got you interested in politics?
I can't really remember. I think I just really wanted I don't know, maybe it was probably the advertising on television with the starving African children and stuff, and you wanted to be like, oh, I'd love to help someone like that, and it just kind of grew and grew. I was very interested in wars, and I did a module last semester, which was ethnic conflict, which was fantastic, and I'd love to do a master's in ethnic conflict, nationalism and ethnic conflict.
Yeah.
So I'd love to work in the United Nations, something like that, and like conflict resolution. I'm my 2 final exams for my whole undergraduate are actually this weekend, so I'll be done on Saturday.
Nice. Well, thanks for taking some time then. So,
no problem.
So one of the things that you wanted to talk to me about is one of the things that pretty much everybody wanted to talk about, which is political correctness and how it's seeping into society. So what's going on that front in Ireland?
I think a lot of the stuff you see I think ideas of racism and stuff are imported from America. We all think, oh, we have problems with racism, when America's a very specific problem with racism. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we think, oh my God, you're racist towards black people and that. We never had that problem because, we've only been our own country for 94 years or something like that. 95 years, sorry. But you'll get people, it's generally hard left people on the socialist spectrum. And I'm not saying you don't have to be a socialist, obviously, to be ridiculously, as Margin was saying, regressive left and all.
Yeah.
You get that. We had, the German group Pegida?
Of course.
Pegida.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had a protest here. It was like 100 people or 300 people or something like that.
So it's not really picking up steam there.
Well, this particular incident, they were chased down the street by counter protesters, to which we were like, I totally disagree with their beliefs. They're racist, they're fascist, whatever. But I mean, let them say what they want to say, and give them enough rope to hang themselves. But I think in Ireland, we're doing okay. And when we see stuff that's happening in America, we're like, they're losing their fucking minds.
I can't vouch for everything that's going on here. I'm wondering,
yeah, I know.
I'm wondering about some of it myself. Don't worry.
I think we're okay. But I mean, when it comes to terrorist attacks and criticizing Islam, you do get some pretty not Islam. Sorry, the use of Islam in a violent way, use of anything in a violent way.
Mm-hmm.
When I mentioned that in a class, and I got some pretty funny looks.
Yeah, that's been one of the through lines here, because we're just talking about ideas, and you mention an idea, and you get some funny looks in class.
Yeah, but no one is shouting me down and claiming a safe space, which is progress, I think.
So you don't have you guys don't have safe spaces there and trigger warnings?
No, we're too small. We're too small. Our universities are too small, and I don't know. It hasn't caught on yet.
I think it's a combo maybe of small universities and a lot of beer. Would that be fair to say?
No, I think it's not showing up to class because of the beer the night before.
Yeah. There you go. Well, listen, it was a pleasure talking to you. And if you have any other fashion recommendations, let me know. All right, I am on with Briana in Japan. Briana, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So according to my notes here, you are in Japan via Tennessee. How many people can say that?
Not very many. So from personal experience, they probably don't even know what Tennessee is here 99% of the time. So
yeah, so
cannot imagine.
Tell me a little bit about that. So you grew up in Tennessee, and when did you move to Japan? What are you doing there? What's going on?
Yeah, so I grew up in Tennessee. I was there for 18 years of my life until I moved to Philadelphia for college. And I've been in Japan for the past 6 months now for study abroad. Nice. I'll be here a bit longer. And let's see. In Japan, they know what the Tennessee Waltz is, and that's about it. I don't even know what that song is. I figured out about it when I was here.
Yeah, it's an oldie, I think.
Extent of their knowledge of the States.
Yeah, so what's that like?
People.
So 6 months in Japan, have you been having major culture shock? What do you like? What don't you like? How's it going?
It has been pretty good so far. The culture shock isn't as bad as I thought it would be. No, it's a pretty globalized world at this point. So you know what Japan is like, just difference-wise. So it's been pretty good so far.
Yeah.
The biggest difference has been the academic system. So it's pretty fundamentally different from American conceptions of education.
Yeah, so that's one of the things. Yeah, and that's one of the things that you had written in that you wanted to talk about a little bit about academia and the difference between America and Japan. So let's do that.
All right, so it's just essentially been really refreshing being here because a lot of the more annoying aspects of American academia are not present here at the moment. They might be later on in the future.
Right, so like what, for example?
So like the big issue with academia right now, as you can imagine, is the ideological constraints placed on lots of students there. Mm-hmm. But college in Japan is not a very ideological place. Like the classroom is a sacred environment. You do not talk about ideological things there. So it's pretty much not an issue, which has been really good for me because that's one of the reasons I wanted to come to Japan, mm-hmm. to avoid that, because my college is very stereotypical, very liberal, and very free speech censorship-y in lots of ways.
Sure, and a lot of the people that I've been talking to today are mentioning things like that, and we know about all this stuff. So in Japan, is there a drawback to having sort of no ideology in the classroom? Like, is there any kind of drawback to just sort of straight information?
There's a bit of a drawback. Japan's academic structure has its own issues that I could complain about all day, but
We only have 8 minutes.
I know. But compared to the issues with America, right now I could deal with them way more, because that's essentially just me saying, why do I have to respect the teacher all the time? I'm American. I don't respect people. So that's really the main issue. But like, information being presented here just so straightforwardly really does seem to help like nip the ideological issues in the bud there, because that's not something teachers are supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So how's it for you? You said you've been there for 6 months, being an outsider in a pretty homogeneous society. Have you had any challenges on that front?
I actually have not. It's pretty interesting. Like, people stare at you, but people stare at anyone who isn't Japanese here. It's,
Right.
I think 99.7% of the people here are Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
And like the 0.3 people who are left are mostly Korean and Chinese. But you're an oddity no matter what you look like if you're from the West.
Yeah.
And
Do you speak Japanese?
okay, I speak Japanese, air quote.
Don't worry, I'm not going to test you. Don't worry.
I started studying in college, so I am in no way fluent.
Yeah.
But
So-
I speak enough to surprise people greatly.
Yeah. So one of the things that you had written in that you wanted to talk about that I thought was really interesting was about content creators being unfairly criticized. And I think what you were referring to is generally just sort of these YouTubers that put their thoughts out there that end up getting trolled endlessly. That's the sense that I got. Am I right on that? And if not, please correct me.
Oh yeah, there's that, and then there's the broader sense of content creation where it's like there are people who are writing books or making comics or movies that are being endlessly criticized with a very ideological bent at this point.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where not meeting certain very leftist standards is considered a drawback and a fault when it probably shouldn't inherently be.
Yeah. So give
And,
me an
I'm a
example of that.
leftist. So it's like, it's not like I am mad when women show up in comic books, but I don't think it's all that fair when you get comic books pulled because they don't have women in them. Like, that's not a drawback.
Yeah. So that
There was the controversy many years ago now, because I'm old, with the Joker comic book cover, where the Joker was abusing Batgirl because the Joker is the Joker. But they had that comic book cover pulled, and the artist essentially blacklisted because they said it encouraged violence against women. And that should not have happened.
the Joker was a bad guy. That's what bad guys do.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to really mix up what characters do versus what the author does. So it's the George Lucas argument where it's just like, he put Leia in a skimpy outfit. It's like, Jabba the Hutt put Leia in a skimpy outfit because Jabba the Hutt is a bad guy and you're supposed to think he's creepy.
Yeah. Do you find that
But
fascinating?
Really confused.
Yeah, I mean, I find that totally fascinating that people seem incapable, a certain amount of people are incapable of separating the artist, the creator, George Lucas, who draws, comes up with the idea of Jabba, and then he had a slave and he put her in a sexy outfit, and people think that's him imposing his view on what he thinks women should be. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I don't want to defend George Lucas, but he's done very objectionable things on other things. But
Jar Jar, is that a Jar Jar knock?
it's a knock against many, many aspects of the Star Wars universe.
Wow.
But not the slave Leia thing. It is fine.
Yeah, you know that Star Wars is like everything to me. I mean, I don't know what to say right now.
I'm sure you would agree with me on many of my complaints.